Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let's Pick This Up Next Week with me, Dee, and our good friend DJ.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, DJ. We're excited to be here with you this week again. We took our little break week, but we are back. And this week, we are wanting to talk more about what goes on in our therapist heads. And we were inspired because April is Autism Acceptance Month. So we're going to talk about neurodiversity and how that kind of intersects with people in general, and then us as therapists and our personal connections to it and all that good stuff. So with that giant preamble, TJ, this is one topic that you definitely want to make sure that we talked about. So tell us a little bit about why.
Yeah, first, I think everyone should notice your shirt, which is Neurodiverse Universe, which I just noticed and is super cool. So Dee is representing over there. So yeah, autism, is something that's pretty close to my heart, and was before I recently found out that I am likely on the spectrum. So I did two self assessments, the BRADS and the ASD quotient, and both of them had scored me in the range of autism spectrum disorder. That was after working with my therapist, who I've been working with for, I've been seeing her for 6 years maybe now, since 2019, so 5 years. And she had been telling me, DJ, there's a lot of research out there that links Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I have, gender dysphoria, which I have, and autism. And she'd tell that to me several times, and I would be like, that is fascinating. That research is great. And it took me some time before it occurred to me that she was trying to tell me that I am autistic. So,
she wasn't directly telling you, she was talking
right,
around it.
Yes. So, and then when it occurred to me, then she was like, right. So, I also used to work, before I became a therapist, I worked a lot in behavioral health and with people with what at that time was developmental disorders. So for the 16 years, I worked with people with autism in like residential or vocational rehab. And then for a year, I did ABA therapy. And was trained in that. So despite working with people who were diagnosed with autism for many years, I totally had a blind spot that also was autistic.
And I think it's always interesting too, because there is a lot of like underdiagnosis, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. And preemptively apologize for those who watch on YouTube and Spotify video. You're going to keep seeing the light shift. I'm in a hotel. Obviously, I don't have this lovely furniture in my own home. So anyway, traveling for work. But yeah, so I totally can understand that journey. I've never been diagnosed with autism, although it's taken me kind of a similar route of a few people in my life who work very closely with autism to say like, that sounds like autism, right? And just kind of a lot of peeling that back. And I'm like, oh, I just assumed everyone thought like this or did this or, whatever. And so I took those similar assessments, and on the RADS, I got a, which is in the autistic range, and AQ was 39, and my CAT-Q. So those are all pretty much in the range of autism. And so I honestly still have a hard time because in the autistic community, a lot of individuals find self-diagnosis very valid, which is different than a lot of other, I'll put quotes around disorders, right? Because a lot of people that are autistic are like, it's not a disorder. This is just how my brain's wired.
Right.
But a lot of disorders, we don't accept self-diagnosis. And so autistics are very much like, yeah, like here's, you can do it in a helpful way, like talking to autistic individuals and hearing from autistic individuals and learning about that experience from them and comparing notes, so to speak. So I've never gotten a diagnosis, so I think sometimes I still have a hard time like identifying as autistic, but it's, it's there.
Right.
But there's so many misdiagnoses.
Yeah. And I think that what's good is that like they do have the assessments that a lot of professionals will use for diagnoses. So like, and they will offer these assessments, because that's where I found them, was going onto a website of a psychologist who in Oregon diagnoses people with autism. And they were like, before you see us, like, here are some assessments that you can do on your own. And when I talked to my therapist, who is a psychiatric nurse practitioner and, does work a lot with people with autism as well in her career, she's like, really the only reason you would need to get an official diagnosis is if you wanted like occupational therapy or felt that, you needed some kind of support. And I think because of that and because the expense, like insurance companies aren't paying for assessments for autism in many, many cases. So because of the expense, I think a lot of people are self-diagnosed, with support of a therapist or somebody too who may not be able to make an official diagnosis.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good point. It's like, even as licensed counselors, we are not, you have to go through additional specialty training and,
Right.
Know a lot more about, psychometrics and grading the tools and that kind of stuff that just because it happens to be in the DSM doesn't mean we can diagnose it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a
Same thing.
psychologist usually or something. Yeah.
And I think you make a
Not
really
a
valid point, because I think a
psychiatrist.
lot of times, not a psychiatrist, because they're just
Yeah,
trying to give
because
medication.
a lot of people will say like, I want to see a psychiatrist, and I'm like, no, you for a if it was a medication, something that was treated with medication, a psychiatrist. But in this case, you would see a psychologist before you would see, not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. Oof,
Yes.
they're so close, those words.
Yes. Well, because autism isn't something to be medicated. It's not something to be cured. Right. It's not something to be fixed. There's a lot of misconceptions about autism. And I think we've, in theory, gotten past the whole like vaccines cause autism, right? Like as a society, we've moved past that, I hope. But it's unfortunate because at this stage, like once you kind of get past school age, it becomes like, do you need accommodations essentially, like in the workplace or whatever that might be? And for some folks, that is the right answer. But for a lot of people, looking back and thinking like, oh, like this could have made school a lot easier if I knew this or had this intervention. I know we talked about that with our episode with Leanna, more about the school systems, but it is interesting of like girls just really aren't diagnosed as much as boys. I actually was talking to someone the other day, and I said something, and he goes, I actually didn't even know that girls could be autistic. I thought that was exclusively like for boys. Like,
It's interesting. It's interesting because there was a lot of times that I would look at the overlap between ADHD and autism. And so I would attribute a lot of the stuff like stimming to ADHD. So like you think of that like stimming. And I think for a lot of things, what was keeping me, so if we say like a box, like the fact of like being able to understand or be empathetic or understand emotions. So the box would be that like as someone who's autistic doesn't understand emotions or lacks empathy. So like that's often like the main thing, or has poor social, doesn't understand social cues and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and a lot of that too, and these are broad stroke generalizations when we're talking about like socialized young boys and socialized young girls, is a lot of times girls will often mask a bit more. And I want to take a moment to loop back to defining a couple of these terms we just threw out. But young girls will typically mask a bit more because they are a little bit like they're socialized to be more connected. And so it becomes like, oh, I see this person doing this, I need to do that. So I need to look like that, even though that doesn't make sense to me. We're like, so when you think about like poor social interactions, you think about, poor eye contact and things like that. Those are mostly things seen in young boys. But to define a couple of those things, for those that aren't super familiar, one is you'll hear us saying a lot of times like just autistic people or autistics. Unlike many other things that are in the DSM, autistic folks don't like the idea of person first language. The idea of like, oh, person with autism. It's like they're like, I'm not a person with autism, I'm an autistic person. Like that's just, you can't separate me like that. So autistic folks tend to, want the disorder first, diagnosis first, language. And then you threw out stimming, if you want to describe what stimming is.
Yeah, so stimming is, what is it? Is it short for something? But stimming is like, yeah, kind of like verbal stimming would be like maybe saying sounds over and over, or making up songs, or constantly feeling like that, like, that need that the act itself, like being able to be verbal and doing the things over, is kind of feels better. It makes kind of calming. So stimming is like, I'm trying to think like the definition for it, but I'm just using like
It's like a
experience. So
repetitive.
behavior, yeah, that
Hmm.
that kind of calms people. So some people might see, I think when a lot of people think of people with autism, they think about stimming like people that do with their hands, like shaking them, or
Hands.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a behavior that kind of like makes you feel better or to help regulate, which some of the
Hmm.
things like, when you're talking about masking, I know for me, an echolalia is something that you see in people,
Yes.
and autistic people, which is like repeating a sound that you hear. Or a word that you hear. I've always done that, never attributed it to autism. But some things, like what you talked about masking, so that means like in public, you may not do something because like it might make you appear to be different. And so, like at home, I will make up weird songs, like just random, doesn't make any sense. And like if I'm by myself, I'm almost always making some kind of noise. But if I'm out in public, someone's going to look at me and think that I'm shy because I may be quiet. And that's because I'm not going to be like doing the natural kind of things that I would do, like if I were at home by myself. So kind of that's what stimming is, but just like a repetitive behavior that may, make you feel more calm or, relaxed.
And echolalia is fascinating because,
Oh,
again, so
yeah.
I can be a very black and white thinker. And so I always thought of echolalia when it talks about it's literally like a word repetition. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I don't repeat words like obsessively. Like I don't do that. But then I broaden my understanding of what it actually means. And it can
Hmm.
include things like you hear someone say a word and you may not understand it, but you put together the context clues of what it probably
Hmm.
means and then start using it in other contexts, whether or not it's the correct word, because it's just that
Hmm.
repeating that word, like it just felt good.
Hmm.
Or even things like, and this is something that I experience a lot, is hearing something that kind of reminds you of a phrase or of a song, like
Hmm.
it reminds you of something, and whether or not it makes sense, it's having to finish that thing. So the easiest one I can
Right.
think of, which I think people can relate to, is like it's like the Red Robin, yum, right? Like
Hmm.
that's like the
Hmm.
phrase, but it's that in so many other ways. And so it's just like, oh, someone says something and I feel like I cannot help the next term out of my mouth because it's just going to be a pairing of whatever I just heard. Like
Right.
that's also a form of echolalia.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not echolalia so much, but like I think a lot of people who are neurodiverse or on the spectrum will, well, like I tell people that I think in movie quotes and song lyrics. So like if someone is saying anything that's out of a song that I know, and I know any song that I hear, I almost always remember the lyrics too. So I will like, start singing that song or something like
Mm.
that, because there's no way that I can't. And I feel like I have to, and a lot of times I have to tell you about it as well. So like it's not just that
Yes.
like it's recalled, but I need you to know that I've recalled that lyric because you said the song lyric to me.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's that
Hmm.
like I can't hold my tongue. I just have to tell you. And
Right.
that's kind of part of the overlap with ADHD. Like that's why the
Hmm.
two are
Yeah. Yeah.
either misdiagnosed or come to get like are co-occurring.
Right. Yeah, and there's the acronym for people who are diagnosed with autism or who have autism and ADHD is like AUDHD, I think
Odd HD.
AUDHD. Yeah. And
Yep.
I was diagnosed ADHD, I've always known I had ADHD as soon as I knew ADHD was a thing. And I got officially diagnosed right before grad school because I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be successful in grad school unless I get some medication. But the interesting thing, Dee, is that we talk about like what is stereotypical female and male presentations of
Hmm.
autism. And I'm trans, non-binary, transgender, born female. And I would always back in the DSM-4, right? It was ADD and ADHD, so like attention deficit disorder versus attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And stereotypically, boys are more hyperactive and girls are more inattentive, which is in the DSM now is inattentive or hyperactive type. And I was always that. Like, everyone around me knew that I was ADHD because super hyper, super fidgety, super, loud in certain situations, but very much disruptive to class when I was a kid, always getting kicked out. And I think I talk about that in the episode with Leanna, which is another thing. Leanna, I've known her 10 million years, Leanna, since grad school. And I would ask every time, is it Leanna or Leanna?
Is it
And I
Leanna
don't
or
ever
Liana?
remember.
Every time.
I've known her for
Every
10
time.
years. I still don't know. And remember too, in grad school, it was so funny because I didn't know about face blindness. So, but in
Yes.
grad school, there were 4 or 5 of girls or women in the program who were all like similar height and had dark hair, and I could
Mm-hmm.
not tell them apart. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
called them the dark-haired girls because I didn't know who was who.
And it's that's aphasia, right? As the technical term for it is aphasia, I think.
Is that face blindness? Yeah.
I think so, if I'm not mistaken. Aphasia. I think. In your slight defense, they were all women around the same age range, same length of hair, same
Uh-huh.
cut, and they just all happened to be in our class. But they all look like very different people. Like it's just back then, the hairstyle
Yeah.
was like the hairstyle.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell them apart at all. But also, my doctor that I had been seeing for several years, probably I don't know time either, which is another thing, with
Time blindness.
neurodiversity is,
That's a lot of
yeah, it's
ADHD.
like,
That's a lot of
yeah,
ADHD.
yeah. And I don't know time because I usually just will say like 5 or 6 years because I don't know time. But anyway, I'd seen her for a long time, and I was in the parking lot of like a big, like there's a Starbucks and some stores and stuff there, and or maybe restaurants, whatever. And she's like calling my name and like walked over to me, and like I have no idea who she is. And she's like, "You didn't recognize me?" And I'm like, "Not without your doctor clothes, I didn't recognize you." So again, like out of context, no idea.
Yeah, I guess I do experience that too. Is that autism? I don't really know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's face blindness. Aphasia?
well,
Is that what
speaking
it
of
is?
that, I think it's aphasia because I'm thinking of there's a book by Oliver
Isn't
Sacks
aphasia
named
what
The
Bruce
Man Who.
Willis has? Where he's lost his language?
I'm gonna look it up now because there's a book by Oliver Sacks named The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Um,
Hmm.
that oh nope, aphasia is speech. You're right.
Yeah, I thought that.
But
I'm like,
what
that's what I
is
think. That's what Bruce Willis has.
another day? Okay, we'll talk for a minute while I figure out what this
Oh
actually is.
yeah,
This is
I
gonna
mean,
bug the crap out of me now.
yeah.
I'm gonna have
I don't
echolalia
know
for the
the
word
word for it because
aphasia.
I just noticed that like that was one of the things I think that came up in the testing for autism. I was like, do you? I'm like, oh yeah, no. And I can't tell you about the millions of times that I've run into people at a store, and they have talked to me and talked to me and talked to me, and they clearly know who I am, and like I have zero clue. And I would just walk out of there, and they'll be like, and or sometimes people who are with me will notice, and they'll be like that person seemed to remember you, but like you didn't know who they were.
But you
No,
don't know.
I had no idea. No
That's
idea.
funny.
Hmm.
Okay, I have the term, but I don't know how to pronounce it.
Mm.
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
Agnosia is the end of it, so there's that.
Oh.
But I'm so bad at pronouncing words. I don't even want to try, really. Uh,
Mm.
Prosopagnosia? I don't know. Prosopagnosia.
Oh yeah.
Whatever
No,
that
that's a
is.
lot of syllables. Which I also found out
And
that
there's
I'm dyslexic. And that's one of the things of dyslexic is having a difficulty pronouncing words with a lot of syllables.
That's fair.
Hmm.
I feel like face blind. Oh, that's where I was going with when I originally started looking at the iPad over here was hearing about some traits that we don't often think of as autism. And so some of these things, so like big caveat here is some of these things are just experienced in humanness. Like just
Hmm.
because you have time blindness doesn't mean you have a disorder, right?
Right.
You're not autistic simply because you
Right.
struggle to make new friends, right? This is a collection of these unwavering characteristics of a person, regardless of
Mhm.
situation. That's what kind of makes it more to that level of
Right.
being considered autistic traits. But I found a list that this person put together because, again, it's really important to listen to autistic creators and their voice
Mhm.
on this because some of the stuff out there is not made by autistics and it's not accepted by autistics. Like,
Mhm.
what's that? Lighted Up Blue or whoever those people are.
Oh,
What's
I
that
don't
one?
know. What is that?
I don't know. It's like one of the big like autism people. Like so the people who are like the Lighted Up Blue or whatever the heck it's called. I should have done more than 4 minutes of research in this, and I know all these
We're
things.
busy people.
And
We're
the
busy
back,
people, Dee.
I know.
We're
I like
and
literally
and
checked into the
and
hotel and got my laptop.
we're so busy, and we're like,
Um,
we should do it. We should do a podcast too.
yeah, we're like, this is the only day we can do this. This break we had was not intentional. We just didn't have time.
Right.
I think, hold on. Now I think it's maybe Autism Speaks. I don't know. But
Oh yeah. So Autism Speaks, I know, because I am in
thank you. Yes.
a Facebook group. I'm in a Facebook group for. They keep changing the name of it because the people in the group, some people usually find offense. So it was like level 1 autistic people, and now it's like higher or
Yes.
something. But I know that Autism Speaks because they also, Dean, you and I were talking before we went on air, that and I want you to know I needed to do on air like this, but I was doing it underneath my
In
desk,
air
but I could bring
quotes.
it up.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
So before we went on air, we were talking about ABA therapy. And I think Autism Speaks, right, is one of the organizations who are really pro ABA therapy. And so people in the community don't like that. I think for me, we'll talk about ABA therapy later because I know you're on a different point right now.
Yeah, no, but it's all valid points
Mhm.
too. Is like because it
Yeah,
has to do with stimming. It's all like
right.
it's so intertwined. Last year I had the pleasure of being part of at work. We have different like subcommittees of our DEI, and so last year I had a bit
Mm.
more time. I don't know how, and so I was a part of the autism subcommittee, and I got to do it. One of my best friends, which was awesome. Her daughter is autistic, and she is an absolute light of my life. Like I'm obsessed with this child.
Mm.
For me to like a child takes a lot. So
Right.
Isla's amazing.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, to like, and this is what helped me learn about it was to talk about things like, yeah, whenever, there's that categorization, but also when people say things like high functioning or low functioning, those are
Hmm.
very, very offensive terms because it has nothing to do with how that person experiences their autism. So if I'm here
Hmm.
saying like, oh, DJ is high functioning, right? Because DJ did all these things, that completely negates DJ's efforts that they put in to doing that, right? Like it could be absolutely
Right.
exhausting to do, this one thing because you're masking
Right.
or the playing, whatever. So it completely negates that person's experience. So
Hmm.
changing that terminology, a lot of it's like more about like what adaptations that person need or just focusing on what that person is as opposed to
Hmm.
high functioning, low functioning is very
Right.
offensive. But
Yeah, and people have their ideas. It's interesting too because I I haven't disclosed to like everybody everywhere, right? That I'm autistic, and there's people who know that I'm a therapist and don't know that I'm autistic. And so someone was talking to me about, autism and therapists, and like I don't know, DJ. Like they say they're autistic, and then do you think that people who are autistic should be therapists? And I said I'm autistic, and they were shocked like you're
mhm,
autistic, like because people have an idea again like what that means and what you can accomplish in your life. And and actually there's a good amount of research out there that talks about autistic people making amazing therapists. And I think that's the thing for me, what has helped me to be able to have such good boundaries with my patients, because like that's what you're supposed to do. And like I'm also able
mhm,
to like leave my work day and not take on my patients any of their stuff with me. I totally can,
mhm,
like this, now I'm in my life, and I'm not taking their emotional baggage, where a lot of neurotypical therapists that I've worked with are people who, I know to be neurotypical, or they believe they're neurotypical, struggle with taking on that emotional. And I literally said in a consultation group once, and they were talking about I have a hard time, like, because I'm taking on my patient stuff. And I said, why would you do that? So like,
The choice, DJ.
right? Because they're like,
Awful.
like, why would you want to do that? That sounds so exhausting. But I think that because I'm able
Yeah.
to have those clear boundaries.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, well, because part of it is that like compartmentalization that comes kind of
Mhm.
with autism,
Right.
to some extent. But yeah, I get it. I take on a lot of supervisees now, like interns and beginning professionals, which is really cool. And that is the most common thing. It's like, how do I separate? And I'm like, I'm bad at separating work from life at this point in my career because it's no longer, I don't do a whole lot of client care anymore. I do
Right.
some, but not a
Right.
lot. And so
That's the
I'm
part that's
taking on
harder. Hmm.
I'm taking home because it is all my mental load, the work of, that I do. So I wish it could separate like that. Uh,
Right. It's that part. It's always been that part. I'm like, it's never been. So
mhm.
we've been doing this. What, when did we graduate? Do you 10 years? Almost 10 years?
10 years.
You did 10 years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah. I think in August for me it'll be 10 years. So
You had an
we,
extra summer. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Cause I had to do both. And because the reason is that both existed. And I like, well, if it exists, I have to do it. So I did school
So,
counseling and mental health counseling, so an extra semester. But it's never been the problem has never been like when I'm stressing about work stuff or not able to like shut it off. It's never been client care. It's always like
mhm,
managing staff, or coworkers or the company. Some whatever's happening in the company. It's like that kind of stuff. Whereas like I'm like my
mhm.
clients, that's the easy stuff. Like I'm not carrying
Yeah.
baggage from that.
Yeah. And I think too, of like talking about autistic counselors and autistic therapists is because autistic folks are really good at like noticing patterns and noticing
Right.
behaviors and things like that, because either it's
Mhm.
used for like masking, which is survival, or
Right.
just kind of inquisitively. It becomes a lot easier. Like
Mhm.
another thing that I tell a lot of new counselors that are like, well, then my client comes in and they just have, every time we just have a different thing to talk about, and I don't understand, like, where do I even go? And so quickly for me, it's easy to see like, well, tell me a little bit about each session. And I don't think I'm like, omnipotent in any way.
Right.
But like, it's really easy for me to see the theme of like,
Yep.
oh, this is what they've presented, but this is the theme. Like,
Yeah.
this is the thing that's under the surface.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I mean, I think therapists are really, that's a bonus as a therapist
It
when you can do
is.
that.
Yeah, and again, it was something that I always and again didn't attribute it to autism until like I have more now that I know I have more, I can go back and be like, "Oh yeah, that's why." I've always been like I've never diagnosed by criteria. It's always
Hmm.
patterns. I've always seen like the pattern. And again, I think it is what makes us good supervisors because I think we see stuff that like other therapists may miss. And and I know with my
Hmm.
clients a lot of times, I'll have people that come to me after being in therapy for years and they'll be like, I got more out of one session with you than I maybe had and with like several years with another person. And it's because I can put those pieces together quickly and then also like, let them know the why. This is why
Hmm.
this is happening for you, I know what questions to ask. So a lot of times
Hmm.
my clients will be like, DJ, that's such a great question. And which I answer to, like, that's why they pay me the big bucks. But it's because like I can ask the questions because, I see the pattern. And a
Hmm.
lot of times too, like you said, the whatever.
Omnipotent.
Sounds like impotent.
Omnipotence.
Omnipotent. So
Eminem ruined that word. He rapped in a song and called it omnipotent. And I hear
uh-huh.
so many people say omnipotent. I'm like, it's omnipotent.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
omnipotent. So, but a lot of times too, I'll see people, I have to get that look on their face and I'll be like, I promise you I'm not reading your mind. I just see the pattern. So
Hmm.
I want to make sure that they're not like, I don't know if I can come back to you because like if you're a mind reader. But yeah, I think those are a lot of things that do make autistic and again, like boundaries are important and like there's rules.
Hmm.
There's so many rules in being a therapist. It's like the perfect job for a person who's autistic and likes to be able to follow the rules. And like, just tell me how to do the job and I'll do it. Like so I think
And I think too,
it's
it's the
great.
ability. I've never worried about like hurting someone's feelings, if that makes sense. Like, it takes
Hmm.
practice for me to think about someone's feelings. like,
Mm-hmm.
and my impact on them. So I don't normally like really second guess when I want to share like feedback to my client. Like, it's not that I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like blurt it out. But
Right.
when I want to share feedback, I'm not thinking of like, well, how are they gonna, like, well, what is this gonna do? And what, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just sharing feedback. Like, I don't think of it
Right.
as that big of a thing. So again, I think that that makes really effective therapy sessions when,
Right.
I'm not there just thinking about my space in the room,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Right. Or if they
good,
like
good and
you, I
bad.
mean, yeah, I think if you do, I want to make sure that I'm doing my job. I'm doing my job effectively. I'm
Mhm.
doing all the things. And I learn from patients too, like what patients want to know. Some of them don't want all the feedback, so
Yes.
like, so doing it like that, but versus like when I'm working with someone and they tell me that, like what I said about like, I got more out of the session, it doesn't make me feel like I want to pat myself on the back. It doesn't make me feel like,
Hmm.
oh, that I'm so amazing because I think I'm there to do a job. I should be doing that. What it makes me feel
Hmm.
is that, like, this is why I'm getting my PhD in counselor education and supervision, because that should be the experience they have from every therapist. Is that, like,
Yes.
all therapists should be able to do something that feels worthwhile to the patient or the client. That's why. That's what it makes me think. It's like,
Hmm.
that's not, that doesn't make me feel great about myself. It makes me feel bad about the field or
Hmm.
profession. I'm told that we don't call it field anymore. We just call it it's profession, counseling profession, not counseling field.
Always changing terms.
Hmm.
I still have Autism Speaks pulled up on my screen, so I'll loop back for
Yes,
one sec.
yes.
But place like Autism, the Autism Speaks, the Lighted Up Blue, the puzzle piece, some
Hmm.
people live and die on those things. And I feel real bad when it's like, but do you recognize like these groups want to cure autism? And that's not it.
Right,
Like that ain't it. Or it's, a group that's run by non-autistics and non-autistics,
right,
or autistic folks don't have really a say at that higher level.
right,
Um, that's why it's wear red for autism, not blue. That's
hmm
why it's Autism
hmm
Acceptance Month. This is not an awareness month. We know autism
right,
exists,
right,
but it's about how do you accept it? How do you integrate autism friendly things in the world? Like that's all of our job.
right. Yeah.
Uh, Autism has ugly roots. I had no idea in my 4 minutes of research I did while waiting for the podcasting site to load and get started up. So, did you know actually that? So, we talked about before that Asperger's syndrome, which used to be basically a milder form of autism, was how it was kind of
Right,
classified in the DSM.
right,
Started with Hans Asperger forever ago, that talked about the autistic traits plus, essentially, he called it average or superior intelligence. So that's where like the offensive stuff comes in there. But did you know before it was studied as the triad of impairments of social interaction, communication, and imagination were three core areas that they found that autistic individuals shared deviations from
mhm.
quote normal society? I had no
What were the
idea.
three things again, Dee? Can you say them one more time?
Social interaction,
Hmm.
communication, and imagination.
Hmm. Yeah.
I have a very vivid imagination. Do you have a vivid imagination? Can you pretty
No.
much like picture anything?
No, I
No?
don't have a very vivid imagination. And then communication, I was voted shyest in my high school class. And ADHD, because again, I forget what the other one you said. Communication, imagination, social interaction.
Social
Yeah,
interaction.
those were things that I struggled with like early. Not that I didn't know how to communicate, but that like I don't know, sometimes, I feel like that like I don't always understand people, like in my personal life. Like as a professional, I feel like it's so much different because I'm out of it, right? Like I'm not in that equation. But yeah, I can see how I relate to those three things.
Yeah, that
Also
was the
empathy.
I think Kenner.
Oh, because you brought it up a few times. And like, the fact that like, as a therapist, you have to be, or a counselor, you have to be empathetic. And the assumption is that people with autism lack empathy. And, it's been proven over and over that that's not true. And I can look back into my earlier years in my life and be like, I wasn't an empathetic person. Like that would be the last thing that people would have thought about me. but I
Mm-hmm.
learned that empathy has value, and like, it helps in connecting to people, and I care about people. So like, to care about people, you have to be empathetic. And so I learned how to be empathetic. It wasn't something that was like innate.
But
Mhm.
I think, and
Right. No. Yeah.
the thing I
Right.
want to say, and then like that's it. I forget the good morning, how are you? I'm
Right.
just like, did this happen yet? And it's like that can be very rude, and I don't ever mean it that way.
Right, and it is. I'm the same way, and I know, like, especially if am in task mode, like anytime that I've ever been moving
Mm,
with somebody, and I'll have a group of people like moving, I'm always like this, and then people will be like, can you say please, or can you like, oh my God, if I stop to say please every single time that something needs to be done, we're never going to get done. But like, the person felt like that they're not getting the soft and stuff that yes, definitely like
mm.
that kind of stuff. It just I'm like, and I always say like, neurotypical people love validation before they get like feedback. I just want feedback. But I
Mhm.
remember, and it's something that I apply as a supervisor and that I apply in my job, is that so one of the things that I learned, praise, polish, praise. People love that. So like, it doesn't come natural to me,
Oh,
but like I do it because I know that that information is received better, follows that pattern.
we could do a whole episode on the sandwich method,
I'm
which is what like a version of what you described, and how much I
uh-huh.
hate it, and
Mm-hmm.
how I feel it's
It
ineffective, and science proves it, but
You
it's
think
making
so?
people
But
feel
people do
better.
love it. People do love to be validated
They
before
think
they get
they
any
think they do,
any feedback. You think they Go ahead.
but for
I'm so curious.
anxious people, oh, this is my soapbox now. For anxious people, they when you praise, polish, praise, right? So the feedback
Mm-hmm.
sandwich is putting the negative in the middle, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you say something positive, but the anxious person has paired that after a compliment, a criticism will come, they're waiting for that shoe to drop. Even if you're having a
Mm-hmm.
conversation and only giving positive feedback, they're going to be waiting to hear the criticism because that's what they're going to look for. And narcissistic people will only hear the good stuff. So they're going to gloss over that middle criticism. They
Mm-hmm.
also don't hear it well. And then also just psychologically how we listen, we tend to take away beginnings of the conversation and ends. We tend to forget middles in general. So for like three different reasons right there, the sandwich method sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Awful. Awful.
But
See
I
middle.
do. I
Awful.
I feel like that whenever I've given like whenever I've given like criticism or like some kind of feedback where or some kind of polish to somebody, that like it doesn't seem to be received well unless I've validated something else. And like we definitely have to validate people's emotions, which is like a huge thing that we have to do in
Sure.
in
Yeah.
therapy and in relationships or whatever. Like nobody wants to feel like they've just brought something to you and you're just like, well, here's the feedback.
Of course, yeah. And I do think it's important to have a human conversation and not just be like,
Right.
here's this thing you did bad or wrong, bye,
Right.
right? But when people like, because I think the sandwich method almost becomes like so you did this so well, this was not great, this part really needed a lot of work, but you're so
Hmm.
good at this. Like
Right.
that
Well, yeah, that is.
not
Yeah.
helpful because you're
Hmm.
trying to protect that person from their feelings. I had a now friend tell me people should be uncomfortable when they leave after getting the discipline. They should kind of sit with that discomfort because that's where we choose to grow is when we're uncomfortable. So like
Hmm.
not like a looming fear, but like
Right.
being a supervisor is different than a therapist because as a therapist, I want to make sure my client is wrapped nicely and with a bow before they head back out of my office. They're like ready for the
Right.
world. But when I've provided disciplines to staff, the end of the conversation is usually like, okay, here's the next steps. Here's how we're going to move forward.
Right.
This is the strong end of the sentence, and we're going to move on. I'm not trying to rescue their feelings. So,
Hmm.
anyway, I could
Right.
go on that
Yeah.
soapbox forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. So look at that validation.
Thanks.
Now I forget what I was going to say. You keep going. I'm going to remember it.
Well, I was going to talk about autistic traits that this person who wrote this blog did not realize
Oh
were
yeah.
autistic traits. And I'm curious, like which of these you can kind of relate to. I'm going to pick and choose, but one of them is maintaining a list of mental scripts to use, scripts in quotes, mental scripts to use
Hmm.
when making small talk because you find it both incredibly hard and boring to engage in.
Yeah.
Do you
I
script your
don't know if I do
conversations?
scrubs, but I don't know if I do scripts, but like, yeah, I don't love small talk. I'd rather not. I'd rather you not talk to me than small talk.
That's fair. I hate small talk. And
Hmm.
I recently said to someone, like, I'm like, I don't know what it is, but every time I talk to someone for long periods of time, we end up talking about like the weirdest things. And she was like,
Hmm.
what kind of things? And I was like usually like ghosts or like something. And she's like, you realize you just steer the conversation towards your special interests. Like, that's so autistic of you. Like,
Right,
like
right,
that's
right.
I script all the time. I 100% like recite if I'm going to be in a different situation. Like I just notice like I
Really?
mentally script what it is I want to say. Yeah.
Oh,
It makes
interesting.
me
Yeah.
less
I don't,
anxious. Yeah.
if I do it, I don't notice it, but I know that I do avoid. I will always, I would rather like make a joke about something. I don't know if that's the same as small talk. I think small talk is like great, like that kind of like, we don't know, we're both
And
sitting
this
here.
weather
Let's
we're having
talk
is pretty
about,
wild.
yeah, that kind of stuff. Like I
Yeah.
will like make a joke about something, but I've noticed that that's my way of like connecting with people is making some kind of joke, and I do it with everybody. But people have told me that seems like flirting. And I'm like, I don't know what flirting is because that's not what I'm doing.
You have no idea what
That
flirting
I don't
is.
think is
No.
flirting. Yeah.
No. Um I was trying to see if this was on the list because I only skimmed the list before putting it down. But finding sounds get louder. This is another trait that this person realized is part of autism. Finding sounds get louder when you're tired or stressed. Like you have
Oh
to turn
yeah.
down the TV at night for seemingly no good reason.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I am a sensory
Do you
avoidant
ever
for
like,
sure.
does that drive people nuts around you when you like have to dictate sounds around them?
No, I feel like that I've been pretty good at surrounding myself with people who are also sensory avoidant.
No, okay. So
Mhm.
like my boyfriend he's ADHD and he needs all of the sensory everything. And like
Really?
bless him, he understands that I will get more frustrated for sensory overload than he will get from
Mm.
sensory deprivation. So I usually
Yeah.
win that battle
Oh,
because I'll
nice.
literally
Yeah.
be like working or something like on the couch and he's like got the TV going but then he's like with YouTube and then he's like watching TikTok and I'm like there's now three sounds in this room or he'll
Oh,
start
yeah.
talking to me on top of it and I'm like I love you more than life itself. Shut up. Shut up. Pick one sound. You talk, you
Right.
TikTok or you YouTube. That's it.
Right.
Can't deal. It's definitely worse when I'm stressed.
Yeah.
But with that feeling a short sense of rage when there's a sudden loud noise. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I hate that. Or wind.
Do
Wind.
you have
Wind annoys the hell out of me.
I
Oh, it gets, I
the
hate it.
sound or the feeling?
The
The sound or
sound
the
and the
feeling?
feeling. Yeah. Like I can be inside watching the wind outside and hearing it and just be like angry, so mad.
I love the sound of wind around a building, but I hate
Mm.
the feeling of wind. Like it's what like I never understood why like I would still wear like long sleeves or like light hoodies even when like it's pretty nice outside. Like I
Hmm.
temperature wise, I could wear a t-shirt or a tank and be good. And I realized really recently that the reason I do is because I don't like how wind feels on my skin.
Oh, no,
I
it
just don't
feels
like it.
gross, but I don't like anything about it.
It's
I
so gross.
hate it.
Yeah. Um, actually, so feeling certain noises cause physical pain, like you just kind of
Mm.
physically
Hmm.
respond, like have a
Yeah.
visceral reaction to some noises.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, have an aversion to certain fabric textures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
hardly ever like if I could do like I've thought about joking and asking you like can I do the podcast without a shirt on because like generally in my day because
Sure.
because I work because I work from home so if I get an hour break like if I don't have like lunch break or I don't have a session for some reason my shirt is off like anytime that I'm gonna have like I barely yeah I no tags. I cut my tags off. Like, I just
Mm,
don't. I don't
get
like
the
to, I
tags.
normally don't wear, if I do wear shirts, I wear cut off shirts. That's
You were the
my
ones really,
preference.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were the ones that were cut really. Yeah,
Yeah.
why not? I mean, like, you're trans mask privilege over there. You wouldn't get flagged on YouTube for not.
But I don't. I tried it on Facebook after top surgery, and I'm gonna take a like my profile picture with my shirt off and see what happens. Nope, never been flagged.
Didn't you? Oh, good
Mm,
for you.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, the certain fabric textures. So my husband's famous for like if we go someplace and I like see it at like a fabric that I want to touch, he kind of
Uh-huh.
preemptively tells me, like, we're like talking about something completely random and he'll spot it before I do. And he's like, he'll touch it and be like, not that one. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Like, I'll have an awful day if I touch something that feels
Right,
dry.
right, right.
So
Oh yeah,
he'll
no.
get it out
Mm-mm.
of the way for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. And everyone has to know if
Mhm.
I don't like it too. Food textures too.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, I
That's
was
also on the list.
recently at a food. I don't know what it was. I was like, try a bunch of different foods, and I tried
Like
something,
tasting.
and the texture was like, and I was like, just completely, I just couldn't. Everyone else liked it. They were like, and I was like, just nope, I can't, and I'm completely dysregulated for a while because that was a nasty texture.
That's fair. I'm like that with yogurt. Like yogurt, I like
Hmm.
the flavor of yogurt. I do not like
Hmm.
how it feels on my tongue.
Oh yeah,
It feels
yeah. I can eat
dry.
yogurt
I
though.
don't know how to
Yeah,
describe it, but dry.
yogurt feels dry to you.
Yogurt,
Interesting.
it feels dry. Yeah.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, Next on the list was cutting tags out of your clothes
Yep.
because they're itchy and annoying. Changing to a more comfortable clothes because they don't feel right.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
notice I get in a bad mood when my shirt is scratchy.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I don't like it.
Yep. Yeah.
Um, Foods, flavors, feeling exhausted after you go shopping or to a party or
Yep.
just social interaction.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
100% yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
the
live
other day I
near
had to go
Coachella.
shopping.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you live near Coachella? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I live near Coachella, and I would always tell everyone, you could not pay me to go to Coachella. Like, there's no way. Nope. Nope. Nope.
Yeah, I'll go like I don't ever like to go to the grocery store, but if I go to one, I'm done. I don't know how people
Hmm.
enjoy like, oh, well, I go to Walmart for this and then Kroger for this, but Meijer has the best this. And I'm like, ugh,
Mm-mm. No, I
no,
Instacart. I
no.
Instacart. I Instacart for most of my groceries all the
Yes.
time. I hate it. Grocery shopping is the absolute worst thing in the world to do.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Let's see. I mean, only want to go to your regular supermarket because it's frustrating to not know where things are. Yes. It's sensory grocery
Yeah,
shopping.
yes.
It's sensory
Mhm.
overload.
Yeah.
Like, and there's so much psychology to grocery stores and how they're set up
Mhm.
specifically to do that. And then there's choice
Right.
theory, which basically says the more choices you have, the less happy you are with any of the outcomes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway. Another thing on this list is like sitting at like a coffee shop or a restaurant window and people watching. I love people watching. Like,
I
love
know
it.
that I
If
very
I am
rarely
not
notice people.
perceived.
Yeah. My girlfriend likes
Hmm.
to people watch, and I mean I can do it, but like most of the time, people will be like, "Hey, did you see that?" I'm like, "Oh, that person this." And I'm like, "What person?" Like I usually am not paying attention.
That's fair. Okay, and then let's see. Some of these are pretty obvious, but feeling like people don't often laugh at your jokes, but instead seem to laugh more at the things you've said when you're being serious. I'm like, I get
Mm,
that. Sometimes
maybe. Yeah.
I think I have a dry sense of humor though, so I
I have a
just
dry
assume that's
sense
where
of
it
humor
comes from.
too, yeah. Yeah. And also, I don't know what that
This is
means, but people have told me I have a dry sense of humor, but I'm like, okay, I still
that
don't
sounds
really know
like
what that means.
echolalia. Sounds like echolalia. Echolalia, just without understanding the term you just described, just
Hmm.
like latched onto it. I know this is already a long episode, but we talked a little bit about ABA, and I want to go back to it because it's something that's so ABA is applied behavior analysis, and
Hmm.
it's part of conditioning is where it comes from. And so the idea behind ABA, so you and I have both been ABA therapists.
Hmm.
I worked as an ABA therapist when I was in college. I got a part-time job being a home health aide to an individual with special needs. And part of what I did, like a lot of it was just like home health stuff. But part of what we did too is some things that had roots in ABA, although it was not with
Hmm.
ABA in a lot of ways is trying like it's how you train a dog. If I'm being like perfect, like that's what it is. It's like you get like the rewards for showing
Right.
the behavior that's accepted. And so in general, I mean, like like it makes sense. We do it with us ourselves too when we try to like create new habits. The ABA
Hmm.
that I did was very like more like teaching skills as far as like, working towards washing his hands correctly and
Right.
things like that he was continuing to develop. But there's a lot more to it that's a lot more like the complete other end of the spectrum is when people are like so far as like strapping a child's arms to their side so they don't take part in like the hand flapping, which is a very common stim for a lot of autistic kids.
Right. Right. Right.
So
And
I'm anti-ABA at this point.
oh yeah, I think I didn't do any ABA therapy that was like that. Mostly when I was doing ABA therapy, it was to decrease like harmful behaviors, such as like hitting people, pinching people, biting people, and to replace with another behavior, or to increase like communication skills. So,
Hmm.
and that can go the same because a lot of times the hitting, biting, right, is because like there's not a communication skill that they have found that word for them. So mostly like I was
Hmm.
doing that kind of, I would never like tying people's arms or trying to like stop something that wasn't
Yeah.
harmful to other people. So I can see
Hmm.
ABA as a way that was effective for those kinds of stuff, but I can understand why, if they're like, you shouldn't do this behavior because you look autistic, then
Hmm.
that's not something you should be using ABA therapy for.
Yes. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think the problem is because that's ABA with fidelity. Like that's what
Hmm.
the true kind of model is it's like, let's eradicate all autistic behaviors as
Yeah.
opposed to just like anyone else, let's take behaviors that do not help you and harm others and let's
Hmm.
turn them into something else.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but there's
Hmm.
new ABA places popping up all the time. We're still,
Hmm. Yeah,
the
there
people
is.
who created, that they started using ABA, with, autistics, same group that looked or created conversion therapy to make gay
Really?
people not gay. And we know how well
I
that worked.
I did not know that bit of information.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Same kind of idea of ship them off to summer camps and, make them not gay. And I'm like, I
Right.
can't imagine anything more gay than going to summer camp, with a bunch of other girls.
I mean, you saw, but I'm a cheerleader, right? That, have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So,
That's what happened.
yeah, I want to, end on the happy note, though. What's your favorite thing about, being a part of the autistic community?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think
I
that
didn't tell you to
like
prep for this one.
no, I think, what I like about being part of the community is like, I think it's helped me learn, things that maybe I didn't understand about myself. And also being able to connect with other people who are going through like the same process. And I think it's really cool to
Mhm.
also connect with people who are getting later in life diagnoses. So, and
Mhm.
other people who are like, now I feel like all the things that I thought maybe were weird about me, I think, are special or make me a part of a
Yeah,
community.
I love that. I would agree. I think having the community is a really big deal. I think too, like one thing I love about having so many autistic traits, and notice I'm still just so hesitant to just embrace the term autism for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be, I don't know. It's not anything against autism. I just don't think I'm cool enough. Is because it's such like I was described multiple times this past week as a taskmaster.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like get things done. Like, my sister's bridal shower was over the
Mm-hmm.
weekend that, I did the lion's share of planning, but the only way it got done was because I was so like almost militant of like this, and that skill has served me well in life. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very much an autistic trait of that need to like organize to that level,
Right.
and to be so decisive on things. Like I don't really have time to think about the gray when it's just like, just do, this is it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so I enjoy
Awesome.
that part of being a part of the
Yeah.
community.
That's cool.
Well, thank you everybody so much, for tuning in this week. I know it's a longer episode, but I think we could probably talk for the entire month of April about autism acceptance. I know this is going to be put out in May, but nonetheless. So it's just something that we're really stoked about to talk about
For
and
sure.
normalize.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody so much for tuning in to, Let's Pick This Up next week. And we hope, we see you next week. Have a good one, everybody.